About 5 years ago, Call Her Daddy was the biggest podcast in the US. And young women across the nation watched this. Now, what is Call Her Daddy? It was a podcast that got famous for what they call the Gluck Gluck 9000. Now, basically, two young women who were living in New York City, again, it's the same concept, were showing their dating escapades around New York City. So this was one of the hosts at the time, Alex Cooper, talking about how to give a Gluck Gluck. I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's a little raunchy, but I'm just going to play a little bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about.
The dick sucking was a grade C minus D average. I'm going to tell anyone listening. I can't describe it, but there's something called the fucking Cooper special. And I know that's why you're about to start talking about sucking dick. Cooper special, you heard it here first.
Partying in Miami, please.
I'm currently packing for Miami and New York. My forehead looks extremely large and shiny. Hello. My boyfriend just happens to be making a movie in Miami at the same time as me having to do work in Miami. We've been working at Barstool for I think about a month now. Yeah, and things have gone pretty great, guys. You know us for our podcast, and the podcast has been doing amazing. It's killing it. Yes, with that said, we are so psyched with our podcast. Oh my gosh, we're such perfectionists. We overthink everything. And we cry after every single recording. Arguing. I don't fucking know. I feel like it's not funny either. I think we're doing horrible over this episode. I'm about to get her mask and I'm all about it. Let's get that show. Okay, I'm in a weird place right now, and I've never in my life really thought about this. I've had a threesome before. I've never had a foursome. I enjoyed myself. It was with another girl, and then a guy. But he's just like a pig. So like I just was like, oh, it was like fun, but it wasn't anything like I need to do this again. Yeah. Then with this new guy, he was sexual, and we've had conversations about like it's the first real relationship that I've been so like sexually pushing the limits. Like he pushes me to the limits, and he's like, I want to do everything with you because it makes me, even if we do shit that's wild, like you like whatever it is, it makes us closer. So we've been talking about possibly like while we're traveling, because like, you can't do it in your bed at home. No, traveling or like in your neighborhood. No, you're like walking the dog, like she looks pretty cute. Like, hey, come on, really? Yeah, like no. So he travels a lot for work, and we are maybe going to like a different country together. And he was like, it could be hot, like if we're like out one night and you go pick someone up and like we bring them back. And I've been thinking about it. It's early enough in the relationship that if it's ever going to happen, it would have to be now, so that like I would have to see like, did I like it?
Or will it be a thing that if you do like it, do you think it would be part of your relationship? Like, or like a holiday?
What he said is like, if you hated it, he was like, I'm down to do it with another guy or another girl. It's down to you. Like, you pick the person. He was like, I want you to pick them because it's more so I want you to have sex with in this threesome that like I want you to be attracted to the guy. And he was like, or the girl, I want you to pick. It's not even for me because I will be more turned on if you are having sex with this girl and having sex like it's so hot. Like I don't even have to fuck her. Like whatever you want to do.
It's all perspective. He's making you see things in a new light.
Because he's like, and if we hate it, we never have to do it. It will be an experience.
Okay, so
Alex previously teased her big day with a wedding-themed lingerie shoot for Kim Kardashian's company Skims, but it seems she was a bit more covered up for her actual ceremony. The 29-year-old podcast host wore a custom-made gown by designer Danielle Frankel, and when it came to planning the occasion, it was a, quote, dream for her.
Oh my goodness. Now, why does that lead to Call Her Daddy having Kamala on in 2024? Now, if you guys don't know, Kamala Harris is our vice president, and she's currently running for president of the United States. And many people have asked, and I think it is a very valid question, how on earth does a sex podcast get a sitting vice president on the show? And the answer to that question is because a lot of women relate to Alex Cooper. They relate to her. We look at this woman, right? You can tell that she's not the best interviewer. It's not like she's cultivated a very unique talent, but what she is she's relatable. Women do not care about skill, or they don't have the tendency to care about skill. They have the tendency to care about relatability.
At which point, my mother turned her head, looked at me, and had the biggest smile. Remember,
ever. These women had very similar career cycles. Who knows? Maybe Alex Cooper will run for office one day. I don't say this to be cynical, but if I had to predict the future, I think we're going to see more of this, where we sell our sexuality young, and then many of these women are going to cycle into other areas, as Kamala did, into politics. You know, she was a known 304 in the political scene, and she was even known to be a side chick of a married guy. And now she's gets to run for office without even getting elected.
That was my mother.
Sitting across from you, I think, you know, as women, we have to work 10 times harder. We got to be smarter. We got to play the game to even get our foot in the door sometimes. Can you tell the daddy gang?
Yeah.
When people tell you no?
Now, this is an example of living in delusion. I am appalled by that question. This is a woman who kickstarted her career by giving blowjob advice, saying that women have it harder. What about the men in the oil rig? What about the men in the coal mine? What about the men in construction? Those are 99% male fields. And somehow, a woman that has spent her 20s partying in New York City and getting the privilege of getting paid to document it and get $60 million is going to cry about women having it harder. This is appalling. This is ridiculous. This is living in delusion.
When people look at you and doubt you, what does that ignite in you?
So I've been told that many times. And through the course of my career, I've been told, at one point, you're too young. I've been told, oh, nobody like you has ever done that before. Oh, they're not ready for you. Oh, and this is the one that kills me. Oh, it's going to be a lot of hard work, right? As though we don't like hard work. And here's my response. I don't hear no. I don't hear no. And I urge all the daddy gang, don't hear no. Just don't hear it.
Throughout this election, your identity has been called into question many times. Your opponent has called you crazy, weak, fake, and dumb. How does that affect you?
I think it's really important not to let other people define you. And usually those people who will attempt to do it don't know you.
I want to talk about before your career in Washington.
Yes.
You mentioned you worked as a prosecutor specializing in sexual assault cases.
Yeah.
And this is something, obviously, I touch on my show. I have so many women that listen. And I want to talk to you because I know you had a personal connection as to why you really sought that out. Can you talk about what led you to taking on that career?
So when I was in high school, my best friend, her name is Wanda, I learned was being sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And, I knew something was going on because she didn't want to go home. She just seemed sad. And so she told me, and I immediately said, you have to come and stay with us. I called my mother, who was at work. Yes, she has to come stay with us, and she did.
Now, for the women that are watching, I want to show you guys how politicians manipulate us. I actually don't like that word because how we allow ourselves to be manipulated by politicians. What they do is before every election season, they tell us some sad story that has to do with SA, grape, or abortion to get us to run to the polls instead of thinking about the issues that are actually important this election season. So I don't go too into politics on this channel, but culture, relationships, and sex absolutely affect every political season. It absolutely does because that's what's important to women. If you look at our media, that's what we care about. We care about relationships, sex. Those are the things that women read on. Politicians know that. So what do? Every election season, they come in and say, you're not going to be able to get your abortion. Somebody is going to grape or essay you because they know we love true crime or whatever. They placate on what we consume as an audience in order to get us to run to the polls and not pay attention to the important issues that actually affect our day-to-day.
And it upset me so that someone where they should feel safe and protected were being so horribly abused and violated, right? And anyway, I decided at a young age, I wanted to do the work of protecting vulnerable people. I mean, look, I'm the eldest of two daughters. I was raised with my mother saying since practically the day my sister was born, look out for your sisters. So maybe it started when I was 2. But Wanda and her experience really convinced me and made me realize how this can happen and what we need to do to stand against it.
Can you, because again, I have women write in being like, I don't know who to tell. I'm DMing you and I'm telling you because the shame and the terror and the where do I go from here? And most of the time it is the people that are closest to them that are doing this.
It is.
What feelings do you have and what is the course of action in that moment that you take?
So the first thing that I would say to anyone going through it is tell someone that you trust. Don't quietly suffer. You have done nothing wrong. You have done nothing wrong, and don't let anyone convince you have. Often the abuser will tell her that if she tells, then something worse will happen. And that is usually wrong. And know that there are people that want you to be safe and will want to protect you, but don't silently suffer. And know that you have a right to live in a place where you feel safe and are actually safe.
Unfortunately, I know that so many women can relate to what we're talking about. 1 in 3 women has experienced some form of sexual
you're
abuse
right. That's
in
exactly
their life.
Right. That's exactly right.
Now, again, if you're a woman and you're watching this channel, you know they want you to be a victim. So what they're going to convince you, what they do is rape used to be, the definition of rape or grape used to be forced sex. They switched that definition to sex without consent. And when they broadened it, it's to convince us that we're victims and that any awkward sexual experience is an assault of some kind. And that's what, and they put this in our institutions, and even schools teach this stuff. And the police system, they back it up. And it's all in an attempt to get us to run to the polls and paint us as victims because there's power in victimhood.
And I feel like when we say that, that number can get lost because it's like 1 in 3 women, like, no, this is happening. This is real. This is happening right now.
But Alex, let me just say this also.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking about it. Because part of the issue is that people don't talk about it. And I don't mean the survivors of it. I mean, nobody does. And the more that we let anything exist in the shadows, the more likely it is that people are suffering and suffering silently. And we need to talk about it. We have to talk about it. Child sexual assault is something that affects far more people than the public discourse about it acknowledges. And the more we talk about it, the more we will address it and deal with it, the more we will be equipped to deal with it, be it in terms of schools, in terms of the society at large, right? And to not stigmatize it.
I agree. I think like the power that we have is through our voice over here, like me trying to have a conversation any chance I can get, the amount of times I have conversations with women. And then I have thousands of women reaching out being like, oh my God, I just remembered something from watching this podcast episode and it brought back the trauma, but now I know I need to get help. Like years ago, this wasn't even a conversation.
But see, this is, and that
again, because years ago, there wasn't as many resources to convince us that we're victims. That's what it is. They expand the definition and throw everything under essay. Everything, to the point that men are afraid to approach women because they don't want to be accused of it. This is how insane it's gotten.
That's exactly right. And so when I say stigmatize it, what I mean is stigmatize the survivor.
Yeah.
We still have so far to go on the issue of child sexual assault. Just like in a previous time, the issue of domestic violence. People didn't talk about domestic violence. And part of it was this really warped idea that, well, what happens in the home is none of our business. But if it happened on the street, it would be our business if we witnessed it on the street. And so the point being that abuse of anyone is something we should all take.
And again, what they're doing is, and women, once you hear this stuff, you will not unhear the pandering. What they do is abuse used to be one person hitting the other unreciprocated. That's what it used to mean. Do you know what it means now? They have expanded the definition to include things like emotional abuse, financial abuse, and all different types of abuse. And again, they do this so that we have more victimhood status. Now, everyone can say, I was abused. And they know that in the realm of women, we operate on attention as our currency. So when we operate on having attention as our currency, and we can use the victimhood status for attention, it's a no wonder that Me Too was a thing. It's no wonder, because anybody could post it and get victimhood points.
Seriously, as opposed to saying, it's not our business. It's something that we have to agree should not happen, and whatever resources and whatever attention we can put into reducing the likelihood that it happens is worthwhile.
How do we make this country safer for women?
Now, this is what I call gaslighting. This is what I call what she's not asking is how immigration has affected safety for all people. But what I don't hear from her is thanking the men that protect us every day. If you have a dispute in your home, you can call the police. You can walk alone at night in any major city, really, with relatively no problems. I know it's getting more dangerous nowadays, but even if something bad happens, we still have the option to call the police and men will protect us. We are a protected class. And still, every day, they will sell us victimhood. None of us are doing the hard jobs in society that there are men literally dying every day trying to get us oysters so we can eat in Alaska. And yet still the question is, how can women be safe? Men are killing themselves at 9 times the rate of women, and yet we still have the tendency to make it all about us. And the politicians just buy into it, or the politicians realize that we are the biggest swing voters. So again, it's no wonder that we see so many adult women in a state of perpetual childlike behavior because the politicians are catering to us. The police force is catering to us. The media is catering to us. They give us whatever we want. Corn stars get married. Sex podcast gets $60 million. What do we not have? If we want to have kids at 35, IVF still works the majority of the time. You can freeze your eggs and still do it. They have extended fertility by a decade. What more do we need? We have contraceptives that have a 99% rate of not getting pregnant. You can get an IUD and you will be fine. You can use, there's so many options. And yet still we talk about how do we make it better for women?
That's a big question. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, one of the things, for example, on domestic violence that I can tell you is this. When a woman, and in particular, if she has children, if she is economically reliant on her abuser, she's less likely to leave because most women will endure whatever personal physical pain they must in order to make sure their kids have a roof over their head or food. So one of the ways that we know that women are able to walk away from abuse, and there are many layers to her being able to do that, but one of them is, does she have the economic freedom to be able to do that, right?
In 2024, you can work off of your laptop. We can go turn on a camera and make millions of dollars running a podcast. We can go get a tech job where you do virtually nothing. We can go work at the oil rigs, just like the men. We can go become police officers. We have the ability to do all of these different jobs, and yet we still complain. Why?
So one of the ways that we know we can uplift the ability of women to have choices is uplift the ability of women to have economic health and well-being.
I'm going to get more into that later, but about, how we can make that possible. But I do want to reference something I saw was at a rally in Pennsylvania. Former President Trump recently told women, "You will be protected and I will be your protector." What do you make of that?
So he who, when he was president, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did just as he intended. And there are now 20 states with Trump abortion bans, including bans that make no exception for rape or incest, which we just discussed, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime, of a violation to their body, they don't have a right to make a decision about what happened.
So 99.5% of all abortions are elective. Rape and incest is not a primary reason for abortions. So what I would like to say to the maybe 2 women that are watching this is they sell these stories to us to try to make us run to the polls. That's always what they do. It's always some terrible, awful scenario that's going to happen. if you don't vote for our party.
Happens to their body next, which is immoral. So this is the same guy that is now saying that. This is the same guy who said that women should be punished for having abortions. This is the same guy who uses the kind of language he does to describe women. So, yeah, there you go.
I do want to focus on abortion for a moment because 2 years ago, Roe v. Wade was overturned and women lost their constitutional right to an abortion. I put out an episode about it. I flew to North Carolina. I went to a preferred women's health center. I met with women.
Oh, I get a little frustrated because these are adult women. I mean, this woman's older than me. And you know that we have Plan B. You know that we have IUDs. You know that we have pills that we can take every day. You know there's some shot they can put in your arm that you can take to prevent a pregnancy. We have condoms. We have so many different forms of contraceptive. And even if you're in a state where abortion is limited, you can still drive to another state and get an abortion. Yet we still want to be victims. An option is to be more responsible with who you have sex with, or more responsible with when you have sex. You can only get pregnant like 3 days a month, or it's very unlikely otherwise. So you can track your cycle. There's so many options. And yet we still have the ability to play victim.
That we're getting screamed at and chanted at and called baby killers. And it was the most eye-opening experience I've ever had because I am a privileged white woman that lives in Los Angeles and I am so aware of that. I understand that a lot of the younger generation sees things online and is like, what is right? What is wrong? What is real? What is not? Can you explain and talk about what is actually happening to abortion access right now in this country?
Yeah. So again, I thank you for what you've been doing at the earliest stage of this and following the stories. So, on public policy, I often tell my team, look, I don't want to hear about public policy is a fancy kind of speech or paper. Tell me how it'll affect a real person. So let's talk about how it affects a real person. The majority of women who receive abortion care are mothers. So if she's in a state, and by the way, every state in the South, except for Virginia, has an abortion ban. Okay? So imagine she's in a state with an abortion ban. 1 out of 3 women are, by the way, in our country. And she's a mom. So she's going to have to figure out, one, God help her if she has affordable childcare. God help her if she has paid leave. And then she's going to have to go to the airport, stand in a TSA line, sit on a plane next to a perfect stranger, to go to a city where she's never been, to receive the care she needs. She's going to probably have to get right back on that plane because she's got those kids. Her best friend's probably not with her because that's who's taking care of the kids. To get back in that TSA line, to get back on a plane, to go home.
And again, they're doing it again. I am a victim. That is what she's selling. You are a victim, and you will not be able to abort your kid if Trump is elected. That's what they're selling us. It's interesting because the same people that talk about empowering women never talk about all the options that we have and are empowered to take if we so choose. That this whole situation could be prevented from the beginning.
And that's all if they can even afford the plane ticket or the bus ticket.
Exactly.
Because when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I remember my DMs were flooded with thousands of women begging me to help. And it's overwhelming. And I can't even imagine, I'm saying that in front of you, but it's overwhelming. And I remember people begging me like, I just need to afford a bus ticket so I can get out of this abortion desert that I live in the South so I can get to a state. But they can't even, you know what I mean? So it's like these people are literally landlocked into a position that they don't want to be.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing is that you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government shouldn't be telling her what to do. If she chooses, she'll talk to her priest, her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but not the government telling you what to do. And that's what's so outrageous about it, is a bunch of these guys up in these state capitals are writing these decisions because they somehow have decided that they're in a better position to tell you what's in your best interest than you are to know what's in your own best interest. It's outrageous.
It's outrageous. I mean, daddy gang, to put it in our TikTok terms, I have seen girls on the street walk up to men and be like, do you know where a tampon goes? Do you know how many tampons we use? Do you even know how, like, do you know what a X or Y or Z is of a part of our, and they don't know the answer.
I was the first vice president or president to ever in office go to a reproductive health care clinic, ever.
Really?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I didn't know that, but I guess that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. To your point.
And yet the men are making the decisions about our bodies.
And what's so interesting is what they don't talk about is that men have conscription. Now, it hasn't been used in years, right? But if the government decides that a war has broken out and it's bad enough, men can still be put in the military, right? Where they have no choice.
Here's the other thing about this point, it's about IVF treatments and access. It's about access to contraception, which is very much at risk with these folks. It is about, back to the point about reproductive health clinics. You know what those clinics also do? They do PAPs. They do breast cancer screenings. They do HIV testing.
So this is the same thing. Plausible deniability. No, it's not abortion. It's the PAPs. It's the testing. How dumb do they think we are? This is what, the same way I think how dumb is Ross to accept that deal. I think the same thing when we listen to this stuff. You're telling me an abortion clinic, yes, they have other services, but let's be honest. The main service that they are selling at places like Planned Parenthood is abortion. There have been whistleblowers that have come out and said this.
And they're having to close in many places with these bans. So think about the fact that for anyone who has gone to one of these clinics, you understand that it is sometimes the most trusted place where people receive that kind of health care because they walk into those places that are generally staffed by people who create a safe place for people to come in without judgment. So anyone seeking any kind of reproductive health care and wanting to go to a place where they feel safe and without judgment, these clinics have often been the place that people can go. And many of them are having to close because of these laws.
I was raised Catholic and abortion is a sin. And when I put out that episode, I had a lot of women reach out to me saying like, wow, I live in the South and I never thought about it that way. Like maybe I am pro-choice because I won't get an abortion because of my religion, but why should we control what someone else wants to do?
And that's and you know what's interesting, Alex, to your point, what I'm finding as I travel, people who 2 years ago, before Roe v. Wade was overturned, people who felt very strong about that they are anti-abortion, are now seeing what's happening and saying, I didn't intend for all this to happen. And I think that's also why in state after state, so-called red states and so-called blue states, when this issue has been on the ballot, the American people are voting for freedom. Because ultimately it's about, look, this is not about imposing my thoughts on you in terms of what you do with your life or your body. It's actually quite the opposite. It's saying the government shouldn't be telling people what to do.
I think that unfortunately we have these real life names. We have these horrific moments that these people are losing their lives, right? We have a woman named Amber Thurman who died in Georgia because the abortion bans in that state, the doctors were too afraid to treat her.
Do you guys believe that? I mean, someone will have to send me the story, but come on. Every election cycle, they find some sob story to scare us into the polls. And there has to be a point where we realize that other issues are more important this election season.